Kai Rostov's mother always said one thing. One day that big mouth of yours will either save you or kill you. Right now, standing before the blue-skinned queen who ruled 14 star systems from her crystalline throne, Kai was about to find out which. But it wasn't the question he expected, not even close. "Human," Queen Ashira said, her voice echoing through the hum of quantum drives, "do you think I'm sexy?" And Kai Rostov, in the most dangerous moment of his life, did the stupidest thing he could do. He told the truth. Kai Rostov had always imagined that being captured by an alien empire would involve more screaming and less architectural confusion. The corridor bent in ways that made his inner ear protest, walls flowing with colors that didn't exist in any human spectrum. His escort, 2 guards whose armor seemed to be made of solidified light, hadn't spoken a word since dragging him from his impounded cargo vessel. He'd tried conversation. "So do you guys get dental, health benefits? Because that armor looks heavy and I'm concerned about your spinal health." Nothing, not even a threatening gesture. Just the steady hum of their equipment and the unsettling whisper of his own boots on floors that felt simultaneously solid and intangible. The doors to the throne room opened without anyone touching them, which Kai felt was showing off. Inside, the space defied geometry in ways that would make mathematicians weep. The ceiling arched into infinity, or maybe it just looked that way because of the star field that rippled across it like living constellations. Kai had approximately 3 seconds to absorb the impossible grandeur before his eyes found the throne, and more importantly, the figure seated upon it. Queen Ashira of the Lytheran Empire looked like someone had taken humanity's concept of beauty and filtered it through nebula gas and cosmic radiation. Her skin glowed with that distinctive light blue luminescence he'd only seen in mission briefings, like Earth's sky had been concentrated into living flesh. But it was her ears that marked her as unmistakably other, long and elegant, sweeping back from her temples in graceful curves that would make any sculptor abandon their craft in despair. She watched him with eyes that shifted between violet and silver, and Kai felt the sudden, inappropriate urge to laugh at the absurdity of his situation. So he did. A short, nervous bark of sound that echoed embarrassingly through the chamber. Her expression didn't change. "You find something amusing, human." "Oh, definitely not amusing," Kai heard himself say, because his mouth had never learned when to quit. More like existentially terrifying with hints of architectural impossibility. "This room violates at least 4 laws of physics I'm aware of, and I only passed basic engineering." One of the guards made a sound that might have been a growl. Ashira raised one elegant hand and the guard fell silent. She leaned forward slightly and starlight from her robes, actual starlight, woven into fabric, scattered across the floor between them. "Your vessel was carrying unauthorized scanning equipment through restricted space. The penalty is typically conversion into base particles." She paused, and Kai's stomach attempted to invert itself. "However, your linguistic database intrigued us. 17,000 languages, including 4 we thought extinct." "I collect them," Kai said weakly. "Like some people collect stamps, except words are less likely to give you paper cuts." "You make jokes when frightened." "It's either that or cry, and I've got a reputation to maintain." "Well had, past tense, before the whole particle conversion thing." Something flickered in her expression. Amusement, maybe, or possibly indigestion. With alien royalty, it was hard to tell. She stood, and the movement was liquid grace given form. As she descended the steps from her throne, Kai noticed she was tall, nearly his height, and the way she moved suggested someone who'd never questioned their right to command space itself. "Leave us," she said, and her voice carried harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't replicate. The guards hesitated for exactly half a second before departing. The doors sealed behind them with a sound like a whisper being folded into silence. And suddenly, Kai was very, very alone with the most powerful being in 14 star systems, in a room that shouldn't exist, on a ship traveling through dimensions he couldn't properly name. She circled him slowly, studying him the way a scientist might examine an interesting specimen. Kai kept his eyes forward, counting the impossible stars on the ceiling, wondering if his last words in this universe were going to be a half-finished joke about paper cuts. Then she stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the way light moved beneath her skin like bioluminescent currents, and asked the question that would change absolutely everything. "Human, do you think I'm sexy?" The words hung in the air between them like a paradox waiting to collapse. Kai's brain, which had successfully navigated 17,000 languages and their accompanying cultural nuances, suddenly forgot how to process basic sentence structure. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. He probably looked like a particularly confused fish, which wasn't helping his case for humanity being an intelligent species worth preserving. "I'm sorry," he finally managed, "but did you just... is this a translation error? Because my neural implant sometimes gets idioms wrong, and last week it told a Valorian merchant that his mother smelled like probability equations." Ashira's expression remained perfectly neutral, which somehow made everything worse. She took another step closer, and Kai caught the faint scent of ozone and something floral that definitely didn't grow on any planet he'd visited. "Your translator is functioning correctly. I asked if you find me sexually attractive." "Right, yes, okay." Kai's hands were doing that thing where they moved around independently of his conscious control, like they were trying to semaphore for help. "So this is either a test where the wrong answer gets me disintegrated, or a cultural thing I'm completely missing, or possibly both, which would actually be impressive multitasking on the execution front. You still haven't answered." "I'm aware, I'm very aware, painfully aware. The awareness is physically hurting me right now." He ran his hand through his hair, which had definitely seen better days after 3 weeks in space followed by aggressive imprisonment. Think Rostov. Why would an alien queen ask this? Political leverage, psychological warfare, some kind of bizarre diplomatic protocol where lying meant war and honesty meant worse. She tilted her head, those impossibly long ears catching the starlight in ways that made them seem almost translucent. "In your database, you have 43 different human languages words for beauty. In Lytheran, we have only one, and it translates poorly. I want to know if the concept crosses the void between our species." Oh, Kai blinked. "Oh, that's actually kind of... Wait, you went through my personal files." "We went through everything. Your collection of ancient Earth music is statistically improbable. No one needs 700 variations of something called jazz. Jazz is civilization's greatest achievement, and I'll die on that hill." Which might be literally, now that I think about it. He laughed, that nervous edge still there, but something was shifting in his understanding. She wasn't interrogating him. She was genuinely asking. There was vulnerability in the question, hidden beneath layers of regal composure and the kind of power that could crack planets. Kai looked at her properly then, really looked. Yes, she was beautiful in that objective, undeniable way that made artists weep. The light blue skin that seemed to hold its own luminescence, the elegant sweep of those ears, the way her features balanced alien and familiar in proportions that shouldn't work but absolutely did. But there was something else in her eyes, something that flickered behind the cosmic violet, uncertainty, maybe, or loneliness wearing a crown. "Can I ask you something first?" He was stalling, he knew it, she knew it. "Why does it matter what I think? You're a queen. You command star systems. You could probably have me classified as a decorative plant and no one would argue. Perhaps that's precisely why it matters." She moved away from him then, walking to the vast window that showed the curve of space bending around her flagship. "Everyone who looks at me sees the queen, the empire, the power. They see what I represent, not what I am. And you think a random human with commitment issues and too many jazz files is going to see something different. You're still making jokes, even now. It's pathological at this point." She turned back to him, and there was something almost like a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. So answer the question, Kai Rostov. Do you think I'm sexy? Not as a queen, not as a symbol, not as a strategic alliance or a xenobiological curiosity. Just as she hesitated, and it was the most human thing he'd seen her do, as someone standing in a room with someone else. Kai took a deep breath. The quantum drives hummed their eternal song. Somewhere in the distance, stars were being born and dying, and here he was, about to answer the most dangerous question he'd ever been asked. Yes, he said simply. Yes, Kai said, and then immediately kept talking because his survival instinct had apparently taken a vacation. But not for the reasons you probably think, and definitely not in the way that makes sense. And honestly, I'm not even sure this is a good answer so much as an honest one, which might be worse depending on your cultural stance on honesty, which I realize I should have researched before getting captured, but... Breathe, Ashira said, and there was definitely amusement in her voice now. Kai breathed. Okay, right, so here's the thing about sexy. He started pacing because standing still while his brain tried to navigate this conversational minefield felt impossible. It's not just the obvious stuff. I mean, yes, you're objectively stunning in ways that make me question whether my species peaked too early evolutionarily speaking. Those ears alone could inspire religions. But that's not really what you asked, is it? She watched him pace, her head tilting in that way that made the starlight dance across her features. Go on. You asked if I think you're sexy, and sexy is... Look, sexy is complicated. It's the confidence to ask a terrifying question when you already hold all the power. It's being curious enough to go through some idiot's jazz collection instead of just spacing him. He stopped pacing and looked directly at her. It's being powerful enough to crush me like a bug, but being brave enough to care what I think anyway. Something shifted in her expression. The regal mask cracked just slightly, revealing something raw underneath. You see loneliness. I see someone who rules 14 star systems and can't remember the last time someone looked at them like a person. Kai surprised himself with how steady his voice was. I see someone who asked a question because they needed to hear an answer that wasn't filtered through politics or fear, or whatever it is that makes everyone around you treat you like a living weapon. That's quite the interpretation from a single question. I'm a linguist. Reading between the lines is literally my job. Well, was my job before the imprisonment and possible particle conversion. He managed a crooked smile. Plus, I know loneliness when I see it. Takes one to know one, as we say on Earth. I've spent 3 years drifting between stars with nothing but my database and increasingly one-sided conversations with my ship's AI. Her name's Beatrice, and she's developed opinions about my music choices. Ashira laughed then, actually laughed, and the sound rippled through the chamber like solar winds through crystal. Your AI judges your taste in music. Harshly and frequently. She says jazz is mathematical chaos masquerading as art, which is honestly the most hurtful thing anyone's ever said to me. And I once had a Krillian diplomat tell me my face looked like a badly rendered probability matrix. I don't understand human humor. Most humans don't either, so you're in good company. Kai rubbed the back of his neck. Look, Your Majesty. Ashira, just Ashira for this conversation. Ashira, he tested the name, found it fitted her better than any title could. You asked me a question and I'm giving you the most honest answer I can. Yes, I think you're sexy. Not despite the blue skin or the ears, or the fact that you could probably atomize me with a thought, but because you're standing here asking impossible questions and actually caring about the answers. That's incredibly attractive, even if it's also absolutely terrifying. She moved closer again, and this time there was no calculation in it, just genuine curiosity. No one has ever answered me like this. Probably because most people have better survival instincts than I do. Or perhaps because most people see the crown before they see the person wearing it. She was close enough now that Kai could see the patterns of light moving beneath her skin, like bioluminescent currents following paths only they understood. You're either very brave or very foolish. Why not both? I contain multitudes, also crippling anxiety and an inappropriate attachment to 20th century music, but we've covered that already. Tell me more, she said, and it wasn't a command from a queen but a request from someone who'd forgotten what honest conversation felt like. About loneliness, about seeing past surfaces, about why you think vulnerability is attractive. So Kai talked, about the spaces between stars and the silence that fills them, about how power creates distance and distance creates hunger for connection, about his failed relationships and her impossible position, and how sometimes the bravest thing anyone can do is admit they need to be seen. They stood at the observation window for what might have been hours or minutes. Time felt negotiable aboard a ship that bent space for convenience. Kai had talked himself nearly hoarse, covering everything from existential dread to why Coltrane's solos were essentially mathematical prayers. Ashira had listened, occasionally asking questions that proved she was actually paying attention, which was more than most dates he'd managed. So, Kai finally said, I've answered your question, probably revealed way too much about my psychological damage, and definitely talked more than any prisoner in history. What happens now? Because I've made peace with the particle conversion thing, but I'd like to request that you aim for my left side. My right profile has always been better. Ashira turned from the window, and something had changed in her bearing. She still radiated authority, but there was warmth there now, something that hadn't been present when he'd first stumbled into her throne room. I should explain why I asked the question. Please do, because I've been running theories and they range from elaborate psychological torture to weird alien mating ritual, and I'm hoping for neither. My people are considering a treaty with humanity. Full diplomatic relations, trade agreements, cultural exchange. But there's resistance among my advisors. They claim humans can't see past surface differences, that you'll always view us as fundamentally other. She gestured to herself, to her luminescent blue skin and those elegant, impossible ears. I needed to know if a human, confronted with someone who looks like me, could see past the alien features to the person underneath. So this was a test. Kai wasn't sure if he felt relieved or disappointed. It was a question that needed answering. Your response, all of it, the rambling and the honesty and the terrible jokes, proved something my intelligence reports never could. She smiled, and Kai realized he'd been right earlier about vulnerability being attractive. You saw me. Not the queen, not the alien, not the political entity. Just someone who needed to be recognized as more than their exterior. To be fair, you made it easy by asking possibly the most disarming question in the history of interstellar relations. I have been accused of unorthodox diplomatic methods before. She moved to her throne, touched something on the armrest that made the walls shimmer with data streams. Kai Rostov, I'm offering you a position, cultural liaison between the Lytheran Empire and human space. Your job would be translating not just language but context, helping both our peoples understand each other beyond the surface level. Kai blinked. You're offering me a job. I thought we were doing the whole, meaningful conversation before execution thing. The particle conversion threat was mostly theatrical. We've been monitoring your vessel for weeks. Anyone who spends 3 years alone in space learning extinct languages and arguing with their AI about jazz is exactly the kind of person we need building bridges. Beatrice is going to be insufferable about this. She predicted I'd either get executed or hired, and she loves being right. He paused, actually considering it. A month ago, he'd been drifting between stations, taking whatever translation work paid, slowly accepting that he'd spend his life in the spaces between things. Now he was being offered purpose, connection, a chance to matter. Can I still collect languages? I'd insist on it, and you'll need to explain jazz to my court musicians. They're convinced it's some form of auditory warfare. They're not entirely wrong. Kai laughed, feeling something unknot in his chest that had been tight for years. Okay, yes, I accept, assuming this isn't still some elaborate setup where you're testing my commitment issues. Your commitment issues are documented in your psychological profile, along with your tendency towards self-deprecation and your irrational attachment to impractical music. She stood, extended her hand in a gesture that was purely human, probably researched specifically for this moment. Welcome to the bridge between worlds, Kai Rostov. He took her hand. Her skin was warm, almost feverishly so, and that bioluminescence pulsed gently under his fingers. So, about human humor. First lesson, timing is everything, and the best jokes are usually the ones that make you uncomfortable first. I'm beginning to understand why Beatrice finds you exhausting. Wait until you hear my thoughts on Mingus. I have a 3-hour lecture prepared. Ashira's laugh echoed through the impossible chamber, and outside the window, stars wheeled past in patterns that suggested the universe had better things to do than maintain straight lines. Kai thought about loneliness and connection, about how sometimes the most important bridges are built with honesty instead of strategy, with vulnerability instead of strength. He'd come here expecting endings and found beginnings instead. One more thing, he said as they walked toward the door. That question you asked, did you ever get your own answer? She glanced at him, those nebula eyes bright with something that might have been mischief. I'll let you know,